Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, I have done the unspeakable. I have regretted every decision leading up to this point, but I have leveled and played a Forge Guard all the way to endgame again. EHG, they dropped the forbidden fruit in front of me. On stream, we literally hit a world splitter with T7 melee fire from a Nemesis egg. And we're all like, ha ha ha, we should play Smelter's Wrath, right? Because, the increased area makes the charge speed faster. Ha ha ha. Makes, Smelter's Wrath actually playable. So let's level Forge Guard. And I did. And let me tell you, it was a very large amount of stress put onto me, as not only was it 20 million worth of gold later and also a few brain cells lost, we have finally found something at the end of the tunnel, finally found some salvation, a playable Forge Guard build. We've done it. While sorcerers and, falconers are deleting Aberoth in 0.5 seconds, we can actually play the game and do decent damage with a Smelter's Wrath Forge Guard with absurd investment. It's great. It's so wonderful, dude. So I thought that since I actually played a Forge Guard after the rework, I thought I'd give my thoughts on the rework as a whole. So that's what this video is going to be about. If you haven't already, I would heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel. That's the best way of currently supporting me currently, and it's the best way of showing me that you want more videos like this one. Now, let's talk about the build more in detail, shall we? And my thoughts about Forge Guard. I'll be making a full build showcase tomorrow or the next day, but this is going to be my overall thoughts on Forge Guard specifically. So if you don't know, in patch 1.1, its passive tree got a lot of love. There was a lot of changes to it, and the moment I saw them, I was like, oh, this is not going to be enough to make Forge Guard good, and sadly, as I always am, I was right again. Forge Guard definitely did not get enough of a change to make it more than a, complimentary meme to the rest of the game, and this build just proves it even further. So the problem that I have with this build is it's playable. I'm around like 670 corruption. We killed Aberoth in maybe, I think, like 4 minutes or something like that. And like our Harbinger kill time and our boss kill time is like 3 minutes. So it's like 1 minute 30 per boss on the monolith, which sounds fine. But if you compare it to everything else that's in the game right now, it's definitely potatoes in comparison. Now, that's fine. But then you take into account the amount of investment I've put into my fucking character. That's where the problem is, okay? Not only do I have a Titan Heart with double prefix slammed, a 2LP one, I also have an absurd relic. I don't even know why I was allowed to buy this. Same thing with the gloves, same thing with the weapon, of course, same thing. The helmet's not that overpowered, and the amulet isn't either. And it's just all this investment and even some perfect, and I mean perfect, 5 to 30 health hybrid idols, because for some reason they're on trade for like 1 million gold each. So I just like boop, 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 boop. And all of a sudden I have a playset of 530 idols, which makes this even more absurd considering that you should never have access to this much power. And all in all, it's just so much effort. And the reason why is because their passive tree is just so bad. So like, for instance, there's a lot of sub-themes in the current Forge Guard tree that is trying to force you to stack strength, okay? So there's nodes that benefit from a bunch of strength, but they're all obscenely bad. They're awful. Like, for instance, there's a node that gives you 1% crit multi per 2 strength. Now, overall, most builds will maybe hit 100 strength if they really care about strength stacking. So this is only 50% crit multi. That is not enough for the strength investment, dude, at all. When we first had this passive released to us, like leaked to us, we thought it said 50% more critical strike damage, right? So like you do 50% more damage with crits. No, it's just additive. It would make sense if it was 50% more critical strike multiplier. It would probably be a good buff to most sentinels right now. As long as you're wearing a two-hander, it would be the kind of thing, the push that Sentinel needs to be viable in endgame. No, it's just additive. So it's really just not worth stacking strength. There's also another node that gives you 1% fizz and fire pen per 5 strength. So in total, you're going to get maybe 25% pen in endgame. Like, that's not enough for strength either. Like, all of this combined is still not enough. Not to deal with the current endgame, anyways. The problem right now is currently the devs are bouncing around 300 corruption, but the player base is pushing around 700 at average, and that is because that's when favor gain meets an acceptable margin. So if the devs ever want like a lower corruption to be the meta, then they need to like fix favor farming. But that's a topic for a different video. But essentially, we're comparing this build to 700 corruption, and it clears fine. Like it's fine. Like it does almost enough damage. The event mobs are a little bit of a pain, but like, you know, that's for every build, right? But like the boss kill times are not fast enough for how much I've invested in this character. I would not suggest this build at all to anyone, and that's unfortunate because the playstyle is so much fun. It's exactly what a lot of people want. You just stand there still, channeling stuff and smacking enemies. Like, how could you ask for more, dude? Like, Smelter's Wrath is such a sick skill with such a cool animation. Like, it's just sad to see it in a state where it's like, I would say that Forge Guard, this build specifically, is 80% the way there to being a good build. It just needs like a little bit more damage here and there, and it would be good to go. And that's really it. That's the biggest problem. Note that I said damage, okay? The survivability on Forge Guard is almost there. Not only do you have the 15% less dot damage taken, which can be doubled by using a potion, you have the 5% less damage taken, which then can get doubled for you running a shield, which no one's doing right now because it's a bad idea in terms of the amount of damage you're doing unless you're playing an ailment build. If you're playing a crit build, like a melee crit build, using a shield is a death sentence, as you will never do enough damage. Because melee flat is a very hard stat to come by, and that's why a T7 world splitter, a T7 melee flat fire world splitter is such a big deal, because this is flat we wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. The only other place for flat is on the passive tree, and maybe like, let's say like a Falcon Fist maybe, and that would be it. That's all the flat you ever get. Yeah, so, but yeah, I think right now the defenses of the Forge Guard tree are there. They're good enough, but I'll be honest, like that percent crit multi node could literally be more crit multi, more damage. Just like, you know, I don't know, the more crit multi at the top of Rune Master. They seem to like Rune Master a lot. They seem to give them a lot of toys. But then like when it comes to Forge Guard, hey buddy, why don't you just get 2 strength per point? Why don't you get that instead while wielding a 2-handed weapon? Is that good enough for you? All right, good. It's just such a imbalance of what each class gets. I think their problem is they're thinking that being tanky is good enough, but like you do need damage eventually. No matter how tanky you get, especially with Last Epoch, with how enemies scale, you do have to kill them at some point. You could make a ZDBS build and like just phase tank everything, but no one wants to fucking play that, dude. Like there's only like a few people that want to play that, and one of them is Quinn. Who wants to play like Quinn, dude? Like I don't. And that's why I really hate Forge Guard right now, even after the rework. It's just not good enough to compete with everything else. And this is an extension to melee as well. Dude, playing a bow build like the Blast Rain Bleed Marksman, right? And then swapping over to a melee build functionally. Obviously, I have screen wide AoE, but I have to sit there and channel, so everything gets in melee range anyways, right? So it's as close to a melee build as I could possibly get, especially considering I have to use reversal for the damage buff, which hopefully won't be the case next patch, but I really don't think they're going to add enough damage to make up for that, right? And then, of course, Abyssal Echoes I need to cast on stuff, so I am effectively a melee build, even though my AoE is big, right? Going from a range build to a melee build is just so absurd, dude. It's so crazy. Like I have a little bit of range. I can kind of like kite things and like hit them outside of my range, but I'm not doing max damage, and it just feels awful in comparison. So for instance, right now I'm hitting for like, I think like 3 million, maybe 3.5 million on the dummy. Is it sad that I can say without a shadow of a doubt I'm hitting 3.5 million on the dummy every like few seconds, and I still feel like I'm not doing enough damage, like I'm doing a pathetic amount of damage? That's crazy, dude. Like that's a lot of damage, especially in comparison to a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. The power creep has just jump so high, and it's partly the requirements for builds also jump so high, which causes Forge Guard to be so bad, but also the amount of gear that other classes have access to. Like, for instance, why are all my idols increased HP idols? Why is there no idol that actually helps me in any manner? Why is there no like Smelter's Wrath charge speed idols? Why don't those exist? Then I don't have to use a World Splitter and I can use a different weapon. By the way, the World Splitter is mandatory if you're wondering like, oh, why don't you use a different weapon? The charge speed is so good, it makes Smelter's Wrath almost playable. I'm not going to sit there every 2 seconds and wait for Smelter's Wrath to charge. I'd rather just simply do a little bit less damage and charge faster, as it makes the monolith clear actually feel playable. So before you're like, oh, why don't you use a bigger weapon? We've done the testing too. World Splitter is an absurd weapon. Not only is it giving us 25% base crit, it's also giving us all that melee flat, like I said, and it's giving us a decent amount of melee crit multi, and of course the charge speed. How are you going to replace 120% increased area? How are you just going to replace that? Like, you can't. So World Splitter is the way to go right now for Smelter's Wrath to make it playable. So like I can't even like make a weapon that's better for this. It's crazy. So crazy. But like I was saying before, the item requirements for builds now, like why do I have no idols like whatsoever? Like why don't I have an idol like that I can actually use for the build? Like there's no like more melee crit multi or more damage on idols. There's just like, I don't know, fire penetration with attacks. Normally that would be good, but someone at EHG thought it'd be funny to make Smelter's Wrath a fizz and a fire skill. So even that 14%, 15% fire pen that you'd get on idols, that's halved. You know, having an extra 60% pen would be god tier if Smelter's Wrath had a way of converting itself fully to fire or fizz. That would be great. I don't know why it's split between the two. It doesn't really need to be split between the two. I think the only reason it's split between the two is for flavor reasons. I'm like, don't get me wrong, flavor is fine, but when there's no substance, there's no substance, dude. Like, have you ever like just ate raw sugar? Don't get me wrong, it tastes good, but like after a while, it gets sickening, you know? I'd rather have substance to my meal. And this is the same case here. It's like, sure, flavor is cool and all. It's cool that it does fizz and fire, but like, can you at least make it do enough damage in consequence? Like, this is crazy too. Remember, I'm talking about a skill that has a 400% added damage effectiveness, gets more damage per second or whatever, which is halved or whatever because of charge speed, right? I'm playing it in a very interesting way. Like, I'm charging it faster, which means it deals less damage because of the charge speed. But all that shouldn't really matter. Like, I should still be able to do enough damage to, you know, function in endgame. Now, of course, if you took this in 300 corruption, the definitely be like, thumbs up, this is amazing. But sadly, the YouTube audience doesn't care about builds unless they're at least at 700 corruption. So that's what I have to make my builds for, and that's like what I aim for most of my builds. And this fails it by like maybe like it's like a C minus, I think, if we're gonna talk about like ratings in that regard. But yeah. With all that being said, this has been Dread just ranting about Forge Guard. The build guide for this will be out for tomorrow. Bye.